Outlet Liquor is your place to buy a case. Stock up and save when you shop the lowest prices available every day at Outlet Liquor. You never have to wait for a sale. The more you buy, the more you save. Only at Outlet Liquor.
What's your outlet?
Welcome, everybody, to I'll Hang Up and Listen. Halloween night, all the spooky and spectacular stuff going on, whether it's outside trick-or-treating or down at KeyBank Center. I am joined by producer Steve himself, the host of Where the Buffalo Roam, and intern Vinny. Not really so much an intern now anymore, in my opinion, but I guess he'll always be known as intern Vinny. But tonight he was RJ down at KeyBank Center. He was the RJ to my Dominic Hasek. And we had a blast covering the game for Labatt Blue, and just a blast overall. When's the last time the Sabres scored 8 goals in one game? You know, it's been a long time. And if there were 3 words each of you could use to describe tonight's 8-3 win, what would they be? I'll start with you, Vinny.
Well, like you said, it was a fun one. I guess the name intern doesn't really fit in a technical sense, but when something sticks, it sticks. So I'll just roll with it. With that said, the Sabres were sticking like glue tonight. It seemed like Detroit really couldn't get out of their own zone. And when they did, there was not much they could do. No, you know, in the neutral zone, they were trapped. In the offensive zone, they were barely getting chances. One of their goals was like Owen Power just happened to make a good defensive play, and it took a lucky bounce back to Dylan Larkin. I mean, the Sabres were lucky, talented, and effective tonight. And when those 3 things mesh the way that they're supposed to, you're going to win a lot of hockey games. You need the bounces. The bounces are what win you a lot of games. Talent wins you a lot of games. And when what you're doing is working, boy, not a lot of people can stop you when it's that effective. So I think those are the 3 words to describe the Sabres' performance tonight.
Steve.
I would have to say exciting, obviously. Vibing, which is obvious because 14 of the 18 skaters contributed to that score sheet. So everybody was in sync tonight. And finally, yeah, there were a couple minutes where the Red Wings looked like they could have gotten themselves back in this game. But for the most part, they were absolutely dominant. Exciting, vibing, dominant. And of course, the star of the show, like, I'm scared about that $50 million contract, guys.
I know, right?
Waste of money, guys. Like, holy
my
shit.
God.
Oh my God. Yo, I was looking at the Sabres app to like see if they like updated the stats, and they hadn't yet. He had 6 points in the first 8 games. He doubled his numbers tonight. That's insane. That's ridiculous. In 9 games. Oh my God.
I just, you know, for me, like that contract, I was never really scared of that because the thing with Tage Thompson is, before I get to my 3 words, is it's hard to find any, like, I'm not going to call him a unicorn, but just growing up around hockey, like, you cannot teach size. That's, as a goalie, I was, you know, average at best, but the one thing I always lacked was size. And in today's NHL, you don't even get looked at as a goaltender unless you're 6'2". It's a fact. I mean, Johnny Cullen has one of the greatest combine stories ever of how when they went to go take his height and weight, he showed up there thinking wearing like 6 pairs of socks thinking that he'd have been fine, and then he told him, asked him to take his shoes and socks off, and he pretended like he had to go take a dump so he could take off 8 pairs of socks so he wouldn't be embarrassed because he is the same height as me. But you cannot teach size, and all he really had to do with Tage Thompson is find a coach that could bring out that talent out of Tage. Like, because the talent was there. We've seen it before last year's 38-goal season. You've seen kind of flashes of it. It was just about bringing it out of him. This 6'7" frame, you cannot teach that. And just showing and developing Tage properly, which Don Granato has. He has a history of doing that. I urge anybody to go on YouTube and watch. Like I did an 1.5 hour long TED Talk with USA Hockey years ago about development and how important it is to develop at an early age. And Tage didn't really get that, even with St. Louis. Because he was a first-round pick, he was just kind of thrown into the fire. But you found the right coach in Don Granato, and he finds ways to put players in the best possible situation to succeed according to their talent. He saw a big-bodied, scorer who is immaculate hands. He said, you know what? This guy needs to be in the middle. He needs to be, quarterbacking a lot of stuff from the middle of the ice. And wow, 38 goals scored. And Don Granato was the biggest reason why I was not worried about that contract at all. Is not worried that Don Granato is the reason why I'm not worried about paying Matthias Samuelsson. Because apparently he's not worth $4 million to some people out there. I don't know how, but Don Granato is the X factor in all of this. His just ability to put players in the best possible situations to succeed. We've seen it with Tage. We've seen it with Dylan Cousins. We've seen it. A guy who, in my opinion, is going to be top of the list for the Norris Trophy this year. But if he keeps up at this pace, hell, he might be the top of the list for the Hart Trophy this year in Rasmus Dahlin. So I am not worried at all about those guys' contracts because Don Granato puts these guys in a great spot to succeed because he recognizes the talent that they have and how to utilize that talent.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, look, when you have a game like you had today, it's easy to just say everything's going well. And obviously, this is not something that's going to happen regularly. This is not something that might happen again this year. If the Sabres score 8 goals again this year, I'd be absolutely blown away. But with that said, the fact that they can do this and sort of put all the pieces together in a way that is tangible, it shows that there are things they can do successfully sort of consistently throughout the year. Obviously, the last time the Sabres scored 8 goals in a game was the second game of the 50th anniversary season. They beat the Devils 8-2. They were wearing the white and gold jerseys, which still I think are the second best jerseys we've ever worn as Sabres. I love those white and gold jerseys. Exactly, those right there. Mm-hmm. I thought those were awesome. The team played awesome that night, and they did not play awesome about 6 games after that, the rest of the year. They hadn't been able to put it together. However, that was different. That was a game where they started hot, and they just sort of used their, beginning of the season energy and sort of caught lightning in a bottle. This Sabres team, we mentioned it during the game, they've been outplaying everybody past week and a half. They hadn't won every game. They got rewarded against Chicago with a good performance, a gutsy performance. And then now today, again, that effort sort of culminates in an 8-goal game, which was, they probably could have scored 11 if there was 3.5, 4 minutes left in regulation.
Absolutely. And I'll kick it over to Steve here in a second, but we talked about it right after the game. The Sabres have been able to, take over games, in these first 9, right? They've been able to control the pace of play. They've been able to control possession. One of my biggest things, especially during Ralph Kruger's time here, is just those teams' inability to control the neutral zone because, your zone entries were immediately stopped right in the neutral zone. You could not get through the neutral zone unscathed. This team does. This team controls the neutral zone. You see it in the numbers. They have more time of possession in the offensive zone and more time of possession in the neutral zone. That's such a huge thing. And a big part of that is just Rasmus Dahlin's finally true emergence into the league as a guy who drives possession and drives offensive play. He's playing 25, 26 minutes a night, and rightfully so. Again, like he is, turned into a true leader of this hockey team. And another thing too, and I mentioned to you after the game, Vinny, how often in the past have we seen teams defensively, Sabres teams defensively, that would just allow the opponent to come into the zone untouched, just control, not just offensively, but the physical side of the game. And we were soft. We were soft in front of our own net. We were soft on the boards. Guys who just never get touched. Tonight, even with your two most physical defensemen on the team out in Lyubushkin and Samuelsson, every single time Detroit tried to bring the puck into our end, they were being met by a Sabres forward or a Sabres defenseman. Either it was along the boards or in front of the net, behind the net. They didn't have a chance to enter the zone without being touched by a Sabres player.
That was one of the biggest things that you mentioned that I really think the average person probably can't put their finger on as to what this team does better than other teams. But it's weird. You mentioned that this team does that a little bit more effectively than previous teams had.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the makeup of previous Sabres teams, their defensive core should have been able to do that a lot better than they did, and they never were really able to. Now, as the game has evolved, physicality has sort of taken a back burner to speed and finesse and some of the other things that make the game very exciting. But with that said, this Sabres team is doing a nice job of limiting teams and their speed when they get into the defensive zone.
Yeah, and tonight I said, like, one of my keys tonight were just matching their speed. That's a young hockey. They made a lot of moves in the offseason too. Like, I think they brought in David Perron, Ole Mata, and a couple other not big names, but they have a veteran presence on that hockey team. And we got a chance to see in tonight rookie Soderblom. We got the second Soderblom in two back-to-back games, one in net, and I believe this one was actually taller than Tage Thompson, which is hard to believe. And that kid, I said on the last Hauling Up and Listen, he's gonna be a guy that you gotta be watching in front of our net, because he just, he's a door. He's literally a door. He's just massive, and you can't. It's difficult to move those guys around. And when you're missing guys like Samuelsson and Lyubushkin, guys like that are a problem. He was invisible out there tonight on the physical side of at least from like a physical standpoint. And just like outside of a few flashy plays from Dylan Larkin, man, like, the Sabres, I wasn't worried at all, even when it was 4-3. That was one of the first times in a long time. I think I remember, I understand we kind of gave up a shorty there, tough bounce off Owen Power skate, but I wasn't worried because, again, we have the better coaching, in my opinion, and with past coaching, maybe this team wouldn't know how to respond. They responded with 4 straight goals. 4 straight goals in the third period after allowing to come within 1. That's insanity. And it's been a long, long, long time since we've had a team that has that ability to respond to adversity like that.
Yeah. Obviously the star of the show is 8 goals in one night, but a lot of what you were saying is that, the breakouts were much cleaner tonight. Of course, Dahlin was driving the play, but of course, forwards like Alex Tuck and Dylan Cousins were actually making their plays over those blue lines, getting the pucks in deep and then winning the wall battles. And that was something that we didn't see them doing in the first couple of games. Like, yes, they got to dictate their play and they eventually got it together, but you could see those first periods where they'd be struggling to make that breakout, to make their way through the neutral zone or just make those clean passes. And they definitely tightened it up in that regard. And also the defensive core, I know that they've been put through the paces here. Guys like Lawrence Pyle and Cale Clay getting their first looks in the NHL this year, admittedly unexpectedly, because just due to injuries right now with, Samuelsson, Yoki Haru, and Lyubushkin out. Obviously Seattle was probably I think that was the first night where a lot of these kids were coming together for the first time. So obviously things weren't going to click. Last game of a road trip, And again, literally no team, no matter how good you are, even if you're a cup contender, you're going to have a shitty night. There's going to be ones that you have a bad night, you take your lumps, you write it off. And that's the thing that's great about this team is that they don't, ruminate over the loss the night before. The only thing they know they have control of is the next game, and that's the only thing they're focused on. So yeah, I'm happy to see like defense tightened it up. Yep. I mean, there's one goal that Eric Comrie had no chance of stopping, and that was that feed from the back of from behind the net directly to Dave Perron. He was like standing right on the doorstep, dead to rights. You have to basically be a superhero to stop a shot like that. And the other ones were, bounce off Owen Power's skate. Not a lot you could do there. And then I think there was maybe one goal that he would want back where it was a little bit of a defensive breakdown for Bryson, but I mean, compared to what we've seen with some of these first periods that don't get off to the nicest start, it was nice to see everybody they knew the game plan, they knew the assignment, and they, with the exception of those quick 2 goals from Detroit, later in the second, early in the third there, like that was it. There was that 5 minutes where they had any sort of semblance of control of the game. And then for the other 55 minutes of this night, it was all Sabres. They dictated every aspect of the game. And it was just top to bottom. And again, I mean, Eric Comrie, I think he only faced like 17 shots, but, he was there when you needed him to be. So, I mean, 3 goals on 17 shots isn't going to look good just purely numbers-wise, but, he's there when you need him to be. And if he wasn't, if it was like Tokarski or Dell back there, we could have been looking at like a 5-8 game. Could have been a lot closer. Could have been a little bit more of a nail-biter instead of a blowout.
Yep.
So a couple clicks for the guys on the back end. I mean, I know that when you're scoring 8 goals in a night, you want to just talk about the guys lighting the lamp, but, they don't get the opportunity to light the lamp if, the other team's offensive plays don't get broken down. And then those D-men make those clean passes into the neutral zone so they can do what they do best. So a couple clicks for them.
100%.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Vinny.
I was just sort of wanted to add that, like, you make a good point in that Comrie's numbers are going to look bad from tonight, and in a young season, it's going to, that'll bump his save percentage down a lot closer to 900. Goals against average bumps up a little bit higher. But, like, when you have a goalie, he did what needed to be done today. Mm-hmm. He saved more shots than the other goalie did, and therefore we won the game. That's just sort of how sports work, right? But with that said, you're looking at maybe a team that is they're playing confident. Like, you can tell their passing is crisp. They're making some plays. They're making no look behind the back passes and touch passes, nice slick plays. And some of that stems from good coaching, and B, when you're playing in front of a goalie that you can trust to bail you out in certain situations, it gives you more confidence to take some chances, and then you can capitalize on offense. I've always been a guy that said, I'd rather win a game 5-4 than 2-1. Now, I'd rather just win a game, and sometimes you need your goalie to make some stops to win a game. You're going to need Comrie to make, you're going to need him to make 35 saves sometimes. You're going to need him to make 30 saves sometimes. Letting 3 in on 20 shots, not ideal. Night in and night out, that's not going to get the job done. But one night, that will get the job done, and it did. And I think that shows why things are clicking right now, is they just trust him back there, and he did what needed to be done today.
Yeah, just to add to that point, having confidence in your goalie. I've said this so many times. We were so spoiled at that position. You went from Grant Fuhr to Dominic Hasek to Ryan Miller, and your bridge between Hasek and Miller was Marty Baron. Just so spoiled at the position, but all those guys from those Sabres teams will tell you, whether it was like Michael Pekka, Matt Barnaby, Razors said it in the past, Miro Shatan, like all those guys, you didn't have these players that, you would find on the score sheet every single night, because chances are back then you were playing in low scoring hockey games, 3-2, 2-1, 1-0, 2-0, but you would be, you had these average to below average hockey players that would go out there and take those chances because you had the best goalie in the world, behind you to bail you out if you needed him to. I mean, let's face facts here. The best defenseman Dominic Hasek ever had in his tenure with Buffalo like, a guy who played more than, 1 or 2 years in front of him was probably Alexei Zhitnik, and I mean, outside of Pat LaFontaine, he didn't have a single Hall of Famer in front of him for the majority of his career in Buffalo. And then you go to Ryan Miller and let's look at the teams Miller had. Look at the offensive output he got from those players. They knew that they had a guy like Ryan Miller, who at one point in his career was the best goalie in the world, that would bail you out if you needed him to. So there's just, that point, Vinny, is so key because in the past 3, 4, 5 seasons, we haven't had that guy. We just haven't. You had to play a little bit more defensively minded hockey, or you couldn't really take chances or try and showcase your own offensive skills because you're afraid if you do screw up that it's going to end up in the back of your own net because you have, Michael Hauser back there, or Robin Leonard was probably the best goalie we've had in the last 5 seasons, and even then, like, he struggled with Buffalo. Obviously, outside of the fact that the team was very underdeveloped, but he had his own personal struggles. And then Carter Hutton. I mean, the list goes on and on. The goalie carousel that Buffalo has had since Miller was traded to St. Louis at the trade deadline. And to have two guys at that you can depend on and know that if you need them to make if you need them to make a save, or if you need him to make a save for you, that he will. And it's been a long time since we've had that.
It's got to be, and it's early in the season. I mean, Carter Hutton was really good during the 10-game win streak.
Oh, he's fantastic.
Back. I mean, he was one of the largest reasons that happened. And we can get into them winning most of the games in overtime or shootouts or whatever, but that's semantics, really. But the point is that the goaltending doesn't need to be fantastic every night, but it just needs to be good enough that the team can trust it, right?
Yep.
Now, this is a conversation I will probably want to revisit again in December, and then again in February, and then again in April to see what we actually are looking at. Because, I mean, again, we've seen it. Like, there were times that Tokarski had a good game or a couple good games in a row, and Michael Hauser had a couple good games in a row, and like I said, and Carter Hutton's the biggest example of a goalie that came here, played kind of well. Even Chad Johnson a couple years back was.
I remember Chad. Chad.
He was the unsung hero of the team for a reason, and it seemed like we played better in front of him than we did Robin Leonard. Now, with all that said, they still weren't good enough to get us anywhere. There were games they would bail us out. There were games they'd let in 4 goals on 22 shots, and we would lose 4-1. Now, another problem was, Jack Eichel would score the only goal, and there was no depth scoring. There were a lot of problems with those teams. But the team now, one group can sort of make up for another group's mistakes. There are 3, there's a lot of phases in hockey. You can talk about special teams, but there's offense, defense, and goaltending. The 3 big groups that you can add coaching, that you can add special teams, you can add all that. But with that said, of those 3 main phases of guys that are on the ice, if the offense isn't scoring, that's when you need your defense and your goaltending to play well. As of right now, that's what has happened, is if your goaltending's playing your offense makes up for it. If your defense is playing your goalie can make up for it. Right now, 2 of the phases are playing well when one might not be. And that is why this team is successful. However, the goaltending, it is early. I don't want to jump on the Eric Comrie train, yet. But he has done what has needed to be done so far, and I've been pretty pleased with what we've seen between the pipes for the Sabres so far this season.
Steve, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit soon, but just given the landscape of the free agent goalies that were out there, I mean, obviously we could, dump on the Leafs all we want. Matt Murray injured 2 or 3 games in, and now they're relying on Samsonov and a pretty green Tendy to try to save their season, and things are not going well in Leaf Nation. But I mean, even not guys like that. I mean, just like, guys like Cam Talbot or, Forsberg, like just names, Stalock even, there were just these names where it's like, yeah, they were able to do it at one point, but they're closer to the end of their career than the start. And, I've said this a couple of times and I'll just keep saying it, that I think that like the theme of this team is betting on untapped potential rather than hoping a guy that you've seen struggle can bounce back, because that's what Eric Comrie is. He's a dude who's been living in the shadow of one of the best goaltenders in the league, who hasn't had his proper due because, to be fair, if you've got Connor Hellebuck, fucking play Connor Hellebuck. Don't be an idiot. So no knock to Winnipeg in that regard. But now that he's got a crease that he can like lay claim to, I think that, yeah, there's definitely going to be some bad nights, but I think there's going to be a lot of nights where he surprises people, where he makes some of those saves that can steal the game for you, that like just reinvigorate the whole team. And it's like, well, damn, he just stood on his head for that one. We can't lose this now. And then, maybe that's when maybe Owen Power finally just goes coast to coast and just goes, oh, yeah, let me just do this thing I did about 50 times in Michigan. Whatever. No big deal.
Yeah. And I know you look at Sabres Twitter too. You bring up Owen Power's name. You're starting to hear people say bust, which I think is, that's insanity to me. But it's like
I don't even know how to respond to that.
Yeah, exactly. He's almost. If the guy isn't scoring goals yet, he's gonna start getting shit on it, and just like. In these people, like, have you not learned anything what we just went through with Rasmus Dahlin? I hope I can find the tweets from a couple of years ago where I got into it with an analytical guy about Rasmus Dahlin, and he said that he's not going to develop into what you think he's going to be. He's not. He's drafted first overall, and I pointed to Victor Hedman. I think a lot of people point to Victor Hedman. Very similar in style when they first came into the league, even though Hedman, was a little bit more of a, I don't want to say a bruising defense, but more of a physical defense, but not saying that Rasmus Dahlin isn't. But their trajectory has been the same, if not Dahlin being better. Dahlin took, I think, one season to outscore what Hedman's highest season in his first 5 years into the league. I'm pretty sure it was his rookie year. I want to say his rookie year or his second year. The talent has always been there. It's just finding the coach to put him in the best possible situation to succeed. You're going to get that with Owen Power. It's going to come. It's not going to happen overnight. Listen, it's not even like he's been playing bad. No, if he's not putting points up on the score sheet, he's a bust. It blows my mind. First off, him and Dahlin are not the same defenseman. Dahlin's more of a flashy, coast-to-coast type of guy. Not saying that Owen can't do that, but he's also Owen, especially in his last year at Michigan, was a little bit more known to also take care of business in his own end, which is what you're going to get from him this season. You're not going to get a guy who's going to – not that he doesn't have the confidence to. I've seen Owen Power, especially given opportunities on the power play or the guy goes to the net. He's not afraid to do that. Find me any 19-year-old, 18-year-old defenseman who, drives to the net, during a scrum from the point, or drives to the net just, to put himself in a position to score. Not a lot of kids that age do that as defensemen, and he does. He does it on a consistent basis. Trust me, the points will come, the goals will come. But to sit here and kind of give him, I've seen it, not from a ton of people yet, but I've started to see it, stop it right now. Just stop.
Yeah.
Full stop.
I'll turn it over to Vinny here, but just quick bullet points to piggyback off that. One, again, he is 19 years old. He has not even played 24 games in a league of the best adult athletes of this sport in the world. And two, also incredibly important to remember, half of his D-core is currently injured. I think right now, rather than go score a bunch of goals, his priority is playing defensive defense so the other team doesn't score, which I think we can all argue is pretty important. When Mattias Danielsson, your stay-at-home guy who just got an extension for the next 7 years to be the stay-at-home guy, has to stay home because he's injured, someone's got to step up. And Owen Power, not to say Dahlin isn't doing that, but Owen Power is proving that he can step up. Yeah, he's had a couple unlucky bounces off the skates. It's going to happen to it happened to Olimata tonight. It's going to happen to every single defenseman if you're standing in the crease trying to bully some guy off the puck. That's where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be tying someone up. sometimes the puck's going to bounce off your skate. But again, right now, I think that he's playing it exactly right. And like you've had a conversation with the man. He's an incredibly mature, poised kid. I think he knows his role right now. The role right now, keep the damn puck out of the net. Whatever you got to do. You'll have plenty of time to score goals when the rest of this decor is back and somebody else has got your back and you're not like he's like carrying Cale Clegg right now or like Jacob Bryson right now or Lawrence Pilot right now. Like he doesn't have time to go be wheeling and dealing. He's got to guard that line. It's like everyone calm down.
Yeah, if Cal Clagg's out there with you, I don't need you jumping into the rush.
Nope.
Doing there. And I will say, yeah, Owen Power, if you're listening, and we know that you are.
Yep, friend of the he is a friend of the program.
But with that said, I'm gonna actually take a second, go back to our Darlene point from a couple moments ago. I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a moment and defend our analytics friend that said Darlene was not going to develop into what we think he was going to develop into. He probably wouldn't have if the coaching staff hadn't changed the way that it did. If we had stayed on the same track of coaching styles that we were with, Rasmus Dahlin would not be first overall pick material. No, well, I shouldn't say that. He was always first overall pick material. He wouldn't have developed into worth it first overall pick.
Yep.
He would not have. But because we got the coaching staff that we did, that did happen. So at the time, I think the track wasn't really on the right track. Somebody pulled the switch. We got Kevin Adams, we got Donnie Meatballs, and now he's on the right track, and he's headed straight to Norris Candidateville on the locomotive, and we're all riding in the cars right behind it, just enjoying the ride.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Sorry, I just read Paramat's comment there. About he who must not be named.
Yeah, Ralph Kruger. And here's the thing, and this can even go to the point with Jack Eichel, and how he exited the organization. It's hard to find and sustain success when you have that kind of turnover at possibly the most important position in your organization. Two most important positions in your organization, in head coach and GM. Like, how many head coaches did Jack Eichel have while he was here? 5? Like, he had 4 GMs, I believe. Like, tell me how you're supposed to have that type of, any type of success or sustained success. Try saying that 5 times fast. When you're jumping from coaching scheme to coaching scheme to coaching scheme. And the same thing with Darlene. And you went from a guy like Phil Housley, who really, wants to nurture your ability to be a puck carrying defenseman, just like he was in his career. And then you go from that guy to Ralph Kruger, who just absolutely neutered him in terms of what his best attributes were. And then you sit there for a year and a half under him, and just same thing with Jeff Skinner. Being on the 3rd and 4th line almost his entire tenure. You go from that guy to a guy like Don Granato, who, is all about development and putting players in the best possible situations to succeed. I'll say it 100,000 times, and I've already said it 100,000 times. I'll say it 100,000 times more. That's what he does. That's why he's been able to be successful with the USNTDP. In USA Hockey as an assistant coach, and now as a head coach here with the Buffalo Sabres, from college hockey to the pros. The guy is just, a magician when it comes to development. And he's shown us with Darlene, he's shown us with Tage Thompson, and he's going to show us with Owen Power. So to that point, Vinny, I blame not just Ralph Kruger on that, but I also just blame just the organization as a whole is just not finding the right coach soon enough to really put him on an earlier trajectory to be the guy almost immediately. It took a little while. With that being said, we now do have the guy behind the bench, to the best man for that job in Don Granato.
I'm glad we're in a position that we are. It seems like things are starting to work out. The Sabres they started hot for like the 4th year in a row. That's fine. They might cool off. That's fine. Just we're seeing things that we hadn't really seen in the past. Like the Sabres were hot in the past, and it was like, okay, this is cool, but 6 of these 10 games were all won in overtime or a shootout. We've getting scoring from our top line and our top line only. We need to get depth scoring. Okay, our goalie made 35 out of 36 saves. It's not going to be sustainable. It's Carter Hutton. Now you're seeing, like I mentioned earlier, all these phases sort of working together. So, yeah, I think Owen Power, like you mentioned, Steve, he has not played a lot of games. He's not played with a lot of really high caliber defensemen. He's a player that probably should be playing with a experienced, trustworthy veteran who will stay back when Owen Power skates the puck. We don't really have that on defense right now. There's two, again, he's playing with who was his D partner tonight? I think it was Lawrence Pilot. I know who Lawrence Pilot is. But like with that said, you're looking at our 7 defensemen and you know the name of maybe 5 of them, and only because Casey Fitzgerald has played for the Sabres for the past 3 years. Mm-hmm. If you're a Detroit Red Wings fan and you look at our defensemen, you know who Rasmus Dahlin is, you know who Owen Power is. Maybe you've heard of Jacob Bryson before, and it's possible you saw Lawrence Pilot's name on NHL Network when he came back to the Sabres. Other than that, you probably have no idea who our other 3 defensemen were, and that will certainly play into Owen Power being better in the future. Maybe not the near future, but in the future as we go down the road.
Paramount Pictures, friend of the program. I hate to be that guy, but what if Jack and Dahlin had a guy like Donnie or Ted Nolan, a guy who can work with young players to develop them? Dahlin has him now, but it would have been nice to have that guy for Jack early on. Personally, and I stand by this because I've spoken to people, privy to the situation. I don't even think that, Jack would have ended up kind of being labeled the cancer he was had it not been for a guy like Evander Kane being on this team. I've heard a lot of terrible stories about that guy in terms of leadership and his presence and his contribution to the negative culture and what he introduced a lot of the young players to. So, but with that being said, yeah, I think having a coach like Don Granato would have helped a ton. With that being said, I am not looking in that, and they're in my rear view now. Good luck in Vegas, bro. And everything you do, he's off to a great start.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Had a nice OT winner the other night.
Yeah, that was gorgeous, wasn't it?
That's patented Jack Eichel, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just gonna go walk the dog, take a few laps, and when I find a lane, sure.
Literally, he had possession of that puck for almost like 30 seconds, and that's what Jack Eichel was. That's why he was drafted 2nd overall, and that's why I really do think in Vegas, regardless of how we feel about the guy, he's gonna have probably like a 90+ point season this year. I really do believe that, and good luck to him, man. Whatever. Again, you're not on my team anymore. Post-game comments aside, see you later, man. Good luck. Whatever. It is fun to, mean tweet Jack Eichel every now and then. I'm pretty guilty of it, but at the end of the day, he's not on my hockey team anymore. And I'm really, really, really happy with Alex Tuck and, Peyton Krebs. So with that being said, before we wrap things up here, any bold predictions for the rest of the season? I'll start it off. And I do believe, obviously, this is early, but this is a very bold prediction, and I don't think I'm really out of line to think this right now. Tage Thompson, 50+ goals, and Dahlin in the MVP conversation?
I definitely think Tage cracks 40, without a doubt. We're in a tough division. Goalies are just really good. We're in a tough division. So, yeah, we had a nice night where we peppered Nedeljkovic real hard, but there are going to be plenty of teams to tighten it up. We have yet to meet Boston this year, and Boston's just a fucking wagon right now. And everybody thought Boston was going to be off to the rocky start that like Toronto's off to because of all those injuries. And turns out what they keep saying on every podcast is true. The Boston Bruins are not dead until they die. And they have yet to die, and I'm still not totally sure they can die, which is quite fitting for Halloween. But I definitely think you can do 40. 50 50 might just be out of reach this year, but next year when he knows that every goal he scores is at the price point of $7 million, I think that will be that little extra bit of pep in his step to get to 50 plus. This year, I'm gonna say he caps out at. I'm gonna say he definitely does, but I'm gonna say like 46. So on the higher end of 40, but I think he's just gonna fall short of the 50 mark. That's just me though. He's definitely on that trajectory, but I don't think that he. I just think the league is. I just think that our like division and our conference is still just too fucking hard nosed to be able, because I mean those are like our most common competitors right now.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know if we're going to be able to if he's going to be able to eke out multi-goal nights against those kinds of teams night in and night out. I mean, yeah, I guess we could have a conversation about special teams. It's like, I mean, it was nice to see his power play clapper finally beat somebody at even strength tonight, but whatever they're trying to do with the power play just hasn't quite been working this year. It's kind of like the same setup every time, and they try to feed him. They'll try to feed him 3 times in a row, and after the second or third try, the goalie knows it's going to Tage. So even if he rips it at 100 miles an hour, like the goalie's ready for it. So I think they need to do something to get a little bit more inventive, and I think, and it does bring me back to that goal where Middlestat was dogging it and took Quinn's goal away, where they actually did get a little bit inventive and try a different way to score. And for Jack Quinn, it worked, but then they called the goal back. So if they don't do something to kind of shake up special teams, I think that would be a pretty considerable factor keeping Tage from 50 this year. So I don't know. Maybe they add a special teams coach to the mix to accompany the staff that's already there. I don't know, but something's got to give, because with the amount of offensive talent this team has, when we have an extra man at our advantage, we should be infinitely more effective than we are. I don't think that that's a bold thing to say. I think, eye test people and the analytics nerds will shake hands on that one and agree this power play leaves something to be desired. And that's where Tage could be making his bread and butter. Not that he can't score even strength goals, but if you want to get an extra 10 just handed to you, that's the perfect place to do it.
Yeah. Special teams is going to be that sort of seesaw on us being a good hockey team and us being they're still growing hockey team. If we can get our special teams to be dialed in, we might actually be in the conversation to make the postseason come the springtime. With that said, I like to think of myself as an optimistic person. I come from a pretty pessimistic family, so I don't want to get too down on things, but I think we've had too many years, at least in my lifetime, of the Sabres starting a little bit hot and cooling off for me to want to say right now, like, Sabres are going to get 96 points, or, Comrie's going to, be in the conversation, which that's not really he's played reliable, nothing really in the conversation for any sort of recognition at the end of the year. But with that said, I think my bold prediction revolves sort of around the positioning of our depth offensive unit right now. I think that we might actually have a couple of players on our third and maybe not fourth line. I think we might have a player on our third line score 20 goals. I think that is going to be, that's something we haven't really had the past couple of years, because we haven't really had a top head, like a 40 plus goal scorer, and then a 30, and then a 25, 25, 20. We've had like one guy do this, and then a couple people do this down here. We might have a more filled out offensive unit, and I'm looking forward to that hopefully happening. With that said, 12 days from now, Bruins Sabres, 7 p.m. KeyBank Center, November 12th.
That's a real benchmark game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a real benchmark game for sure. Linus Ullmark, as much as I dislike the way that relationship ended with Buffalo, I've said it on this program plenty of times that going into the deadline, if he wasn't willing to sign the week of the deadline, that you should have traded him. And sure enough, he went into free agency with zero intentions of coming back to Buffalo and went and signed with the Boston Bruins. I'm actually happy that Kevin Adams wasn't willing to pay him what he wanted, because I don't agree with paying goalies that much money. I'm just not, never have been. I think, guys who, there's only one guy in my opinion that's worth, $8+ million a season, and that's Vasilevsky. He's the only one, and he's got a phenomenal Hall of Fame hockey team in front of him. Carey Price, as great as he is, his salary cap hit dramatically affects that team and their ability to be, win consistently. But that is going to be a game where, like I said, a big benchmark game for the Buffalo Sabres. In terms of another bold prediction, will they be buyers at the deadline? Again, bold predictions looking ahead. They keep this kind of stuff up. Could we look at a team that for the first time in 7, 8, 9 years is a buyer at the deadline?
Well, conceivably, if they are still in the hunt and they're chomping at the bit to get to that wild card spot, I mean, it kind of goes directly counterintuitive to like Kevin Adams' philosophy that he's not much about the free agents and, quick fix acquisitions. He's more about the long play, the long con. He wants to grow it. He wants to develop it. And I don't know. I guess it would I think one, we'd have to be at that point where that could be a conversation realistically worth having. But two, there would need to be a deficiency great enough that necessitates that we need to be a buyer. Because if we're going to look at this from just not so much a pessimistic, but more of just like a realist perspective, for the Sabres to be a 500 team this year would be a vast improvement over what we've seen in years past. That's what we were aiming towards. That's what we were building on at the end of last year after the Vegas game and throughout the end of the season. We were a 500 team, and we hadn't been in a very long time. So if that's all we accomplished this year, that's not the playoffs. But for this club and for the direction that we want to be heading in, that's fantastic. But if we're hunting for a wild card spot, to me, that communicates that many, many, many things are working. And I guess the question is, what do you part with to get the insurance that whatever's working very well potentially cannot fail? And that's the rub for me, that even if we're in the hunt, I'm not quite sure if we buy. But obviously we don't sell, but I also don't think we buy a big ticket item like don't put in for Patrick Kane salary retained or anything like that, But like, yeah, I mean I just think that like that's not Kevin Adams' game to be a big ticket buyer. I think he wants to grow it on his own, and I think he wants the kids who are here now to be the ones that are hoisting the trophy over their head, maybe like 5 years from now after they've, struggled, scratch their way to the top of scratch their way into the playoffs, maybe a swift first round exit here or there. And then they the same way Colorado just did, it took a long time for them to finally be that Stanley Cup caliber team. And I think that, that philosophy is right, that you get a winner when you grow it at home rather than buy it, which I guess you could make the argument that's what tonight proved. Ottawa and Detroit were big buyers. We kind of smoked them both in our first meetings.
Mm-hmm.
4-1 against Ottawa, 8-3 tonight. We're growing it. So, yeah, to that end, yeah, I'm not sure if we buy, but I don't think it's for a bad reason.
Yeah, again, these are very, very bold predictions too. I mean, we're 9 games into the season, but it's just fun. I was thinking about the game. It's like, man, this team might be a wagon, and like, it's fun to have those thoughts, right?
Yeah, it's definitely fun.
It's really nice. It's a nice change from the norm. I'm
Yes.
Ask me again in December. I have no interest in answering this question right now. To be completely honest with you, I really don't. Look, the team's needs right now, depth defense, right? If the team's makeup right now stays the way that it is, I don't think we're in the hunt, even for the playoffs, because the lack of defense on the team puts you in a vulnerable position
Mhm.
to lose games, 6-5 or 6-4, 5-3. So then you're not going to win enough games to be in the hunt, and then there's no reason to buy because you're going to be too far out of it.
Yeah.
So you're in a bit of a catch-22 situation. In December, let's say we've got some of our defensemen back. Some of our issues are still on the back end, but we're closer. The injuries are not really the problem anymore. I don't know. Maybe then. But right now, again, it's not worth trading for a true
No.
number one goaltender or anything. I mean, you've got a tender playing at Northeastern right now that you
I'm
don't
not
want
even
to bring
thinking about.
anybody in that might convince him to not come here.
Yeah, I'm not even thinking about that position, to be
Yeah.
100% honest with you.
So there's a couple things that could happen, right? Let's say we lose some depth scoring. Yeah, it's easier to trade for a forward because you have more forwards on your team than any other position. So like that, just you're not upsetting the balance quite as much there. But with that all said, I think you've got guys in Rochester that you might want to give a shot to. Quinn, Paterka, you need to keep them in the lineup. I like Hinostroza. I like seeing him in the lineup. Just like, but with that said, you want to give some of these young guys a chance. The injuries might force you to make that decision. But if injuries are your problem, trading for somebody, buying somebody is not going to solve the problem because you're probably at a loss of those points because of those injuries. So your problem right now is not really it is depth to a certain extent, but a quick fix is not going to do it. I don't think the Sabres are buyers at the deadline. I think the Sabres are similar. Like right now, it's the NFL trade deadline this Tuesday. I don't think Brandon Beane really does anything because his blueprint has proven successful so far, and you're upsetting the chemistry in the locker room. The Sabres are not the Bills. The NFL is not the NHL. With that said,
it's difficult. It's difficult to make though.
It's difficult.
Yeah, it's difficult to make the same types of deals between that's like comparing tomatoes to oranges, right? Like it's like, in the NHL you can retain salary. That's not the case in the NFL. Like you're taking that player's entire salary.
Right.
I think I agree. I don't think Bean does anything dramatic. If people kind of look at, we've heard conversation, rumors too that they've reached out to the Saints about like Kamara and whatnot. I think the one move that does happen is the one that I think we've all expected for a while now, via Von Miller. I think OBJ does end up being a Buffalo Bill.
Yeah.
Maybe they bring
is different
Yeah.
than a trade.
Yeah,
Because then you're not giving
yeah.
up. Draft capital is very, very important to Brandon Beane. And I think Kevin Adams too, which
I
that's
agree.
another comparison I hate
Well-
making. Draft picks in the NFL are completely different than draft picks in the NHL. Most draft picks in the NHL, even first rounders, kind of a crapshoot.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Look at Tyson Kozak, late round pick. What was he, a 6th round pick? 6th, 7th round pick? And you want to know what, man? I look at Kozak, and that's a direct result of just the landscape we've been in over the last 2 years. How you've had to bob and weave when it comes to scouting and kind of adjust to video scouting and not being able to see these guys all the time up close or even talk to them, interview them. I think a guy like Tyson Kozak is a perfect example of that. And that's why you don't always just throw around even mid to late round picks just all willy-nilly, because a kid like that is a perfect example. He could end up being an NHL a contributor in the NHL, even as a 3rd or 4th line guy. And he's having himself not the expected start in Rochester that we hope for, but he's playing very well. Yuri Kulik has been as advertised. The guy already has an NHL release. I mean, I watched him in development camp up close, and he has an absolute cannon. And I would expect both him and Matthew Savoy to be in the same situation that maybe JJ Paterka and Jack Quinn were in this season, vying for roster positions. And then I look at this roster, and something's got to give. I don't think it's a guarantee that Kyle Okposo's done after this season. I really don't. I could totally see Kevin Adams bringing him on. If Kevin wants to sign, or Kyle wants to sign another 1 or 2 year deal, I can absolutely see Kevin signing him to a short term deal. I could absolutely see them bringing back Vinny Hinostroza again. The guy has shown value in your bottom 6. He's a contributor and he's good for the locker room. He's a good culture guy. Gergensen's a different story. We'll see. I love Gergensen's, but somebody, if both of those guys, or even at least one of those 2 guys, is ready to play next year, who is the odd man out? Me personally, I don't care what anyone says. Everyone knows this answer for me. Unless he really gets his act together and starts, and my biggest issue with him has always been off the ice, not coming to, I remember when Dahlin, I think he was going into his 2nd season, the guy put on 20, or I think it was 18 pounds of muscle in the offseason. Casey's never done that. Casey's never put that work in away from the ice. I think that's been his biggest Achilles heel, because the talent is there. The hands are there. I just don't think he has the same type of do or die drive as maybe other players in this team do. And, he's just, he has flashes, but he's inconsistent. And that's just me. I think a guy like him or Gergensen's can be the odd man outcome next year. But again, these are fun conversations to have, because, knowing that guys your jobs aren't safe because you have players in your pipeline. You have this, these riches in the minors, in Europe, in junior hockey, guys who are going to be nipping at the opportunity, or nipping at the butt, or whatever the saying is, chomping at the bit to get an opportunity. Competition is the greatest motivator, and a guy like him could be the odd man out.
Yeah, could be Olofsson, honestly. He definitely had a much better 5-on-5 game today, but we've definitely seen some defensive breakdowns from him as well, some sloppy passes here and there. And, you could make the argument that he might be a one-trick pony, and if you have a Yuri Kulik who can do the same trick just as well, if not better, and doesn't cost you nearly $5 million, then if you're a seller at the deadline again, maybe that's an asset you look to sell. I don't know. But ultimately there will be a logjam at forward. There already is a logjam at forward. We don't have enough space to give literally every young guy, every good player a look, because Vinny Hinostroza is sitting on the bench right now, but all the other young guys are back in rotation. We just had to send Sheahan down so we could call up Jeremy Davies for a little more defensive depth. He might honestly prove to be a little bit more valuable than Cale Clegg, so maybe Clegg gets sent back down. I can't really say for certain, but ultimately something will have to give as Savoy gets closer to development, Kulik gets closer to development, Isaac Rosine gets closer to development, Noah Ostlund is just going to continue to dominate over there. Josh Bloom is even doing great things with the Saginaw Spirit. And then there's the 3 Russians who, 3 years away from now, but Victor Nuchev, that kid is filthy. He has more points than any other kid in the KHL under the age of 20 just at all right now, which, in one of the hardest leagues to play in the world, that's not nothing to be the point leader of young studs in a league of some of the hardest motherfuckers that ever play the game. So no one's job is safe, and I honestly kind of like that.
I love it. Vinny, what are your thoughts?
I don't know.
Do you have a bold prediction?
I'm getting excited. The game was fun today. It was a fun environment. And it is, I have to remind myself, like I've said a couple times, I want to revisit some of these conversations on November 31st, maybe. And then again on December 31st. When we play the Bruins again, by the way.
We play the Bruins Saturday, November 12th, and the next time after that,
December 31st.
December 31st, New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
I will absolutely be at a wedding, so I will not be on that episode.
Pucks pucks and tucks, or tucks and pucks.
I remember when they used to do that. That was fun.
Yeah, but bring it back this year. I'll wear a tuxedo. I don't care. I'll wear my goalie equipment again. I don't give a shit.
It's in Boston, so if you want to drive to Boston and go to TD Garden in a tuxedo, you're more than welcome. I'm sure they'd love to have you.
Yeah. Well, the company I work for now, we do have a suite there. So,
Ooh, all right, there you go.
Turtleneck blazer.
Yeah. Let's get
It's a good look.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm so comfortable right now. This is unbelievable.
You get why RJ's been doing it for 50 years. It's
well, I remember his story about the suspenders, about why he switched to suspenders from a belt. But the turtleneck is like, I'm not really a guy. Like my girlfriend told me, like, yo, I'm not like, don't get a turtle. Like, you're not a person that's gonna look good in a turtleneck. But I'm comfortable. Like, I feel great right now. And this is my grandfather's old blazer. I just really bought into the RJ thing. My hair's silver. Like, if I look like this when I'm like 58 years old, I'm gonna feel really good about myself. So hopefully, fingers crossed. But this is a good look. I might have to do this more often if I'm calling games.
Yeah, I think you might want to take your girl for LASIK because you're looking pretty fresh, my guy. I don't think that's a bad look. I think she might have a wrong opinion on that subject. That's a fresh look, my dude.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, look good, feel good, as they say.
Vinny, as you can see, we can see how Vinny looked tonight. Again, him and Maniac dressed as RJ. I'm gonna real quick before we get into November predictions and end the night on hopefully a high note. I'm gonna show a few, share my screen here, and hopefully, here we go. Let's see here. The pictures from this evening. Dressed as the Dominator here. There it is. And I had a blast, guys. I really, really, really did. It was such an eventful night. I've been to a lot of Halloween games in the past. One of my most fond memories absolutely is a Halloween game where we played the Leafs and won. This was during the drought years still. I think it was during the drought years, yes. Post Briere and Drury, but had an absolute blast tonight. And dressing as Dominic Hasek, sweating my ass off the entire game. Still haven't showered, obviously. Just hopped right on here with you guys. I cannot wait to get in the shower. So November predictions, 6-3 in October. November, they start off with the Penguins, the Hurricanes, the Lightning, the Coyotes, the Golden Knights, the Bruins, as we discussed on November 12th, the Canucks, the Senators, the Maple Leafs, the Habs, the Blues, the Devils, the Lightning again, and November 30th against the Red Wings. How funny is that? We end both the first 2 months with games against the Red Wings. That right there is
14 games.
14 games, yes. 14 games played in the month of November. So, with that being said, that's a heavy schedule. That's almost a game every other night. Where would you slot the Sabres in? If you were just to put a number on a record on it. We again started the season off 6-3. Not many people put them at 6-3 to start the first 9, but Penguins a very winnable game. I still think the Hurricanes are a winnable game. Tampa, that's going to be a tough one, man. Twice in 1 month, 100%. I'd be happy to split there. Coyotes, very winnable game. Golden Knights, very, very winnable game, especially with the goaltending they've been getting. Bruins, I'd love to say a win, but I'm not going to even try to predict that game. The Canucks, that should be a win. The Senators, as competitive as a hockey team they're going to be for the whole season, I expect that to be a win. And then I will accept nothing less than a victory against the Toronto Maple Leafs come November 19th, a game that I believe is that is an away game, I believe. Yep, that's away. So, and then you go right into the Canadiens and the Blues, Devils, Tampa again, and then again we end the month again with the Red Wings. So I honestly probably have them coming out of November with a 500 record.
Yeah, look, I'm gonna agree. We've had a couple of good November months, but I don't know that we're really going to keep up the pace that we've been on right now. I'll give us a little bit better than 500. I'm going to remain slightly optimistic. I'm going to say we're 8-6 at the end of the month. 8-6 I would be very happy with that if we leave November 8-6. I saw Matt said also earlier that we can't have a conversation on November 31st because there is no November 31st. I'm glad he got my joke about me wanting to put off the conversation till even farther into the season. But with all that said, look, I think the Sabres will cool off a little bit, but maintain that early season spice, and just play some good hockey. Not some great hockey, but some good hockey, and get there at the end of November. I'm going to go 8-6 with the record. I'm going to predict, though, it takes me 3 full games in November to get this hair dye out of my hair, though.
Well, I hope we can keep you on for a consistent contributor for I'll Hang Up and Listen, bud, because you always have great insight. I always appreciate when you hop on with us.
I appreciate being here. I can't say that I'm going to have gray hair for all of the games, but it might be a couple of them, whether I like it or not. We'll see how well this shampoo is out. But I do enjoy being on, and I enjoy the fun conversation. I mean, what is more fun besides playing sports than talking about sports?
Yeah.
And this is always a blast. I appreciate you bringing me on, and I will do it as much as I possibly can.
Yeah. Steve, any final thoughts?
I guess my November prediction, I think we'll get 16 points out of it, but I do think it's just going to be 7 regulation dubs, and I think there's going to be 2 overtime L's in there, where we're going to fight for it, we're going to be in it, but we just might not get it. I think we got a couple back-to-backs in there. We haven't had any of those yet this year. We had a relatively easy October in that regard, so I think some of those might catch us off guard. At the end of the day, this is still a young team, and they may not have that kind of conditioning to be able to keep up with the pace. Maybe that's a night where, maybe you do sit a guy like Krebs or something and let Hinostroza take in on that back-to-back or something. But, I think we'll get the 16 points, but 2 of those 16 points are going to be loser points. So I think ultimately it'll end up being a 500, 7 wins, 7 losses. But I think we'll squeeze out a couple extra loser points out of some OT losses in that for a total of 16 points on the month.
I love that prediction. I'm a guy who loves specifics. Like I'll usually say things like, I'll be there in 17 minutes. Like I could just say 15. I really wish I had included overtime loss into my consideration. I love that prediction.
Oh, my God. I would love to give details, but it is officially Tuesday, and I don't have that type of energy. I smell like a sock.
Well, whose fault is that?
I know. I don't regret it at all, dude. I don't regret it at all. I'm sweating through my old 1998 circa Dominic Hasek street hockey gear tonight. I was happy to break that old jersey out, the Milek pads. The only thing that would have made it better was if I had the old school Franklin glove and blocker. I do have those, but I tried to get my hand in them. Way too small, and I just wasn't fudging around with that tonight. But had a blast, and if me coming to the game in full goalie gets some 8 goals every time, then I guess I'm going to do that a lot more often. I guess intern Vinny's going to come into Keybake Center with gray hair and turtleneck and blazer much more often. So with that being said, boys, I'll hang up and listen. It's been an absolute pleasure. And remember, this has been brought to you by Outlet Liquor, the place to buy a case over on Georgia Room Boulevard, and Labatt Blue USA. Remember to drink Labatt responsibly. And as always, let's go Sabres.